Well, it's lovely to be with you. And for those that haven't seen me because they've maybe skipped me when I haven't been the last 2 years, I'm Scottish. You may have understood that. If I'm speaking too quickly, give us a wave and I'll know that I'm speaking too quickly. I won't do anything about it, as is my wont. And but at least we'll know together where we stand. I was thinking, it's Father's Day. It's Father's Day today, and my card is not in the post. And but I like to phone just because it's like a singing telegram that you get rather than an empty card. So that's the excuse that I'm going to line up to. But so I was thinking, what can I say to my dad that'll just kind of keep him up? And I'm going to say to him, I always ask him, what would you like? And he says, I don't need anything. So that's what I'm going to get him. Nothing. And then he'll have had everything. But what I'm going to get him is, I'm going to say to him, what can you always find in the middle of nowhere? What can you always find in the middle of nowhere? What you can always find in the middle of nowhere is the letter H. So that just keeps you going. And that might let you think about that for a few moments as you try and work out. So it is a shocking joke, is that? So that is the plan. So I'm going to tell him that one, and then I'm also going to tell him the other joke that I'd heard, which was of a man walking down a farm track, and he's walking down a farm track. He finds this cart, and there's tippled over, and there's this young farm labourer. He's giving it this, and his sweat's pouring off him, and he's throwing this straw back onto this cart as fast as he can. The man says, "Oh, you need to take a rest and have a drink of water because you're sweating." And he says, "Oh no, my dad wouldn't like it." And he says, "Oh." So he's keen. And he says, "Do you mean your dad wouldn't like it? You need a drink. Stop. Have a drink and I'll help you." He says, "No, my dad wouldn't like it." The man says to him, "Where is your dad? I'm going to speak to him." He says, "He's under the hay." And that's kind of it, isn't it? Sometimes it's all on and we're kind of, but that's Father's Day. That's Father's Day. That's my allusion to Father's Day that I wanted just to share with you, because a lot of people don't have nice fathers. A lot of people are in an unfortunate position where it's not been a happy childhood for them, not been a happy experience. And when we were talking about Father's Day today at our church in Leeds, one or two of the youngsters who haven't had a happy childhood found it very, very difficult and reacted accordingly. So it's difficult when they're creating in the midst of the service, but that's because they've not had that happy experience of a father that would love them. And what we want to say is all the time is that God the Father loves them greatly, and it's how we can then respond to that and show them the love of God in a way that's relevant to them and that will help them and that will correct all the mistakes that they've seen in their short lives, by showing them the perfect Father, which is important. And the way that we can do that is by showing them Jesus. And that's really what I've been thinking about this week, as I've been thinking about coming here. What is there about Jesus that will encourage us to keep going? So, for those that like to take notes, you'd probably not much point listening to me, but there's some S's that I want you to think about. There's seed. There's more seed. No, sorry. There's soil, there's seed, and then there's the sea. And that's Mark chapter 4, and that's what we're going to just read together in a moment or two. But there's a phrase that I was reading a commentary, and this man said in the commentary, he says, Jesus talked a lot in parables. And I grew up always hearing at Sunday school that a parable was a earthly story with a heavenly meaning. That's the thought that I'd always heard as I was growing up. It's an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. But it's more than that. It's a story that's thrown alongside. And when Jesus told stories and parables, they weren't just to entertain. There was a point, there was something to think about, to focus on, and it would be revealed as you thought and thought and thought of it. Jesus didn't just say, oh, I'll tell you the answer. That's how I like people teaching me. Here's the answer. I'm stuck. Here's the answer. Do you know? Right, good. Then I can get on and we can move on to the next bit until I'm stuck again. Jesus didn't teach that way. He wanted people to think about it, and as they reflected, they would understand what God was saying to them. So this is one of his famous stories in Mark chapter 4, and he's beside a lake. Verse 1, Jesus began to teach by the lake. A crowd that gathered around him was so large that he got into a boat and sat in it in the middle of the lake, while all the people were along the shore at the water's edge. He taught them many things by parables, and in his teaching said, listen, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he scattered the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants, so that they did not bear grain. Still other seed fell on good soil. It came up and grew and produced a crop, multiplying 30, 60, or even 100 times. Then Jesus said, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. So that's a story, well-known story for many of us, I'm sure. But it's a story that Jesus told that was obvious to people. They had all watched people farmers throwing seed. They'd all watched that around the villages and towns that they lived in. They'd all seen it. It was something that was so obvious. But what was Jesus getting at? What was Jesus getting at? And that's what he wanted them to think. He's teaching us about God, and he tells us this. He doesn't use a Bible verse. He just tells us this story. What's it about? What's it about? What's its meaning? And it's a bit like if you've got a mirror, and if you go in, you wash your face, then you look in the mirror, and then you comb your hair, all that kind of stuff. You do all that kind of stuff. Now, if you're really keen, you have a real close-up, and you look for, the zit. You look for the lines, and you think, I need to do something about that. And you can look really closely. So you can have a cursory look and just think, it's combed. Job's a good one. Or you can actually sit and think, you're getting a bit older. And you can start thinking about things more deeply. And that's what Jesus wanted these people to think about. As he told them a story that they would all picture in their mind, they could all see it, they'd seen it hundreds of times. What is the point? What is the point? What's he saying? And he was wanting people to think about it. He was wanting people to use their brains and to think for themselves, to think about it. What could that mean? Because the more you think about it, the more chance you've got for it to make an impact in your life. I was reading, and I'll come back to this in a minute, I was reading a book by Nicky Gumbel, and he gives this illustration in his book, which I think's smashing for reading the Bible. He said, imagine you've got your Almira book manual in the book of your car when you bought your new car. Now, I've got a Nissan Almera that's out in the car. So as soon as it said that in the book, I was all ears, because I'm thinking I can then nick this as an illustration for myself. But I've got a Nissan Almera manual. Now, I can open the manual up. Nicky Gumbel says you can open the manual up and you can read it and you can think, oh, marvellous. What a piece of engineering this is. Look at the torque that it's got. Look at the horsepower. Oh, fabulous. It says you can even get to the stage where you can go back and learn Japanese so that you can read it in the original language. And then you can meet together at all these clubs and you can take your Nissan Almera and park it in a field with all the other Nissan Almera people. And you can all have a convention about how brilliant it is. And then Nicky Gumbel says, but that's not what it's for. The reason that you've got a manual in your car is so that you can drive it properly. So that you can enjoy the driving experience. You can use the car to the full. We've got the Bible. We can have it in English. We could learn Greek and Hebrew if you liked, so that you could read the original language. But the reason that God gave us this was not so that I could be super intelligent, chock full of words, throwing out the odd word or two just to impress people. But it's so that it would make a difference. And that's what the parable of the sower is about. It's Jesus says, because if you turn over the page, it tells you what it's about. Jesus then says, the seed is the word of God. And it's about how we respond to it. So it's about how we respond to God's word as we think about it. Some people, it says, will hear God's word and you'll be hearing this and you'll walk out the door and you'll go home and you'll be thinking, what do you find in the middle of nowhere? The letter H. And you'll go, and that's all you'll think about. That's all you'll remember. Some of you will go home and you'll be thinking, oh, hey, that was really good. That was really terrific. Really enjoyed that. That was smashing. But then, what about tea? You know, what about putting the kids to bed? What about what are we going to do tomorrow at work? Oh. And then you kind of lose it. And other times, we'll hear it and we'll be thinking, oh, that's good. Really enjoyed that. Helpful, insightful, all sorts of things. But then somebody will come and say, oh, well, does it really mean that in the original Greek? Do you know, and people will put a spanner in the work. Or people will say, oh, surely you don't believe that. That's fundamentalist. You know, that's dogmatic. And then you think, oh, I don't want to. Oh, I'll not bother. And some of us will hear God's word and we'll think about it and we'll think, that's God that's speaking to me. How many of you, when we sang the song, the next song, were suddenly looking at the waves and thinking, oh, you're right, the light doesn't shine on that white bit. Because after we'd heard it, we all looked. We were looking to see if it would match. And God says, what I want you to do, if you want to become more the people that I want you to, is I want you to receive my word. Think about it. And then apply it to my life. To tomorrow. To tonight even. I come down the road and I was saying it was fraught this morning at our church. It was quite stressful. And I come down the road this morning to here and I was thinking, oh, I was running late because my dinner was on. And I was thinking, oh, I'm late here. And I could just feel myself getting really annoyed with other drivers. Come on, get in! Get in! Do you know what I mean? And there's nothing I could do about it. But I was just getting irate with them. Because it was just, I was caught up with everything else. And Jesus, when he teaches his word, he says, I want you to learn lessons, and then I want you to apply it. Now here's the thing. Why did I tell you that about falling out with other drivers and feeling enraged and really upset with all the goings on of the morning? Because God's word wants to be applied into my life and into our lives in ways that make a difference. That make a difference. And when Jesus says something, it's not so that we have more head knowledge, it's so that it can be applied. And when Jesus told them that parable, he then goes on to tell them some more. So in the verses 12 to 13 onwards, he explains what the parable is about. And then in verse 21, it says this, you do not bring a lamp to put it under a bowl or under a bed. Instead, you put it on a stand. For whatever is hidden is meant to be disclosed, and whatever is concealed is meant to be brought out into the open. If anyone has ears to hear, let him hear. Consider carefully what you hear. With the measure you use, it will be measured to you, and even more. Whoever has will be given more. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And then he says that this is what the kingdom of heaven is like. So I've had the soils. He then goes on to this. The kingdom of God is like this. A man scatters seed on the ground. Night and day, whether he sleeps or gets up, the seed sprouts and grows, though he does not know how. All by itself, the seed produces corn, first the stalk, then the ear, then the full grain. As soon as the grain is ripe, he puts a sickle to it, and the harvest has come. Again he says, what shall we say the kingdom of heaven is like? Or what parable shall we use to describe it? It is like a mustard seed, which is the smallest seed you plant in the ground. Yet even when planted, it grows and becomes the largest of all garden plants, with such big branches that even birds of the air can perch in its shade. With many similar parables, Jesus spoke the word to them, as much as they could understand. So Jesus is telling another story about, not soil, but about seeds. And he talks about this seed, and he said, if you plant it, it grows. Over lunch today, I was talking to Sheila. I just asked Sheila what she did. What are you doing, Sheila? What are you doing at your job? And she was telling us about this. Oh, she said, this. And it's a little cell, and inside it there's little things, and they are released into the body, and that's bad, because we want to block them being released, because if we can stop them being released, then it's better for people that are having heart attacks. So, and it was quite exciting listening to, that's, you need to get it properly, but that's what I've remembered. But it's that kind of thought, that was quite exciting. Quite exciting. Because it goes really, really small, and you're trying to work out what it's about. And Jesus says, the farmer plants his seed. He doesn't know what happens. But eventually, the seeds come up. The seeds come up, and it grows, and the plant comes out and appears. So Jesus is saying, you might not know what the results will be of listening to God's word. But I always like it when you can plan things perfectly. But you don't. So whether night and day passes, God's word, as you listen to God's word, as you read it for yourself, it'll mean specific things to you that'll be different from what it'll mean to me. And we can apply God's word for ourselves so that we can grow and become the people that God wants us to be. And then Jesus says this about the seed. He says there's a mustard seed, and it's really small. Now, seemingly, now there's smaller seeds, right? But at the time, Jesus was thinking, the people in his day would know that that was a really small seed. He says, you put that in the ground, and it grows and it becomes a tree. a mustard tree, and it grows. And then it says there, and the birds of the air can grow in it, can nest in it. Now, if the birds in the parable of the sower were the devil that would take away the seed that was sown in the path, you've got to consider that for this. So, in a church, as God says to them, you're really small. So he says to his disciples, you're really small. You've got me presently with you, and that makes a difference. But I'm going to go away. But when I go away, I'll send another counsellor to be with you. But hold this thought in your mind. It's a small seed that will grow, and the church is going to grow. But as it grows, it will also attract all sorts of people. So there'll be some that will be for Jesus, some that will be interested, some that will not be interested, but they might like the company, and some that will have bad intentions, some that will have good intentions. There'll be all sorts. But the thing is, the church will grow. The church will grow. And that's what God wants. He wants the church to grow, to become the people that he would want them to be. And it's God's job to make people the people that he wants to be. He will do it by his word and through his Spirit. That's how he'll change us to be the people that he would want us to be. And Jesus says to these people, there's soil, there's seed, and then there's the sea. Because it says, when evening came, he said to his disciples, let us go over to the other side. Let's leave the crowd behind. They took Jesus, as he was in the boat. And there were other boats with them. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said, Teacher, don't you care if we drown? He got up, rebuked the wind and the waves. Quiet, be still. Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, why were you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? They were terrified and asked each other, who is this? Even in the wind and the waves obey him. Jesus had been teaching all day, and now he was going to see if they would live up to it. And his friends took him in a boat. Jesus said, let's go to the other side. And they got him in the boat. They were fishermen. They knew what they were doing. That was their job. Dawdle. Get in the boat. We're over there. Jesus went to sleep in the boat. They were happy. But a storm comes up, and it makes such a difference. And here's the thought. The storm's all there. It's swamping the boat. That's why they were frightened. They were frightened because they were out of their depth in the middle of something that they knew happened. But it was there. It was awful. And they thought they were going to drown. So then they wake Jesus with those words, don't you care if we drown? Of course Jesus cared. Of course Jesus cared. But he was hoping that they would have learned things. So he addresses the first problem. He stands up in the boat and says to the wind and the waves, quiet, stop. Now I've tried doing that in the bath. Have you done that in the bath? Well, kids will have done it anyway, and from time to time I still enjoy making the waves go up and down because it's a laugh. And you make the waves go up and down, but then you say to them, stop, and it doesn't. It takes a moment or two for it to go. Jesus said to the wind, stop, be still, and it did it. That's quite an astonishing thing. That's quite a thought. It happened instantaneously. Instantaneously. If it had petered out, what's the big deal? It was calm immediately. It staggered them. Fishermen. Storm to still. like that. That's scary, because that's a Jesus who can do above and beyond that they could even contemplate. You know, it's all right to talk about God, because God's up there. Oh, but they were talking about a God who was right there, right with them, and it made a difference. And they were gobstruck. But Jesus wasn't finished. They were frightened because he could do these amazing things. But Jesus says to them, why were you afraid? Why were you afraid? Now, one of the commentators that I looked up said, well, they shouldn't have been. Why should they be afraid? He gets straight to the matter and says, because they haven't put into practice what he's been teaching them all week. All week, all day, he's been telling them, God is powerful. God makes things happen. God keeps his promises. God keeps his word. And what had God said to them? Jesus had said to them, let's go to the other side. Jesus said, go to the other side. They were going to get there because Jesus was going to get there. Jesus had made a promise. They should have trusted that and known that it would have got there. They wouldn't have needed to awaken Jesus and say, don't you care if we drown? Jesus has said, we're going over there. We're going to get over there. Secondly, the commentator said, Jesus was sleeping. He wasn't bothered. And it wasn't he could sleep through anything. He was confident that that's where God wanted him to be. He was going to get there. And that was quite remarkable. And I had said to him, I want you to learn to trust me. I want you to learn to trust me and to put it into practice. And so today, as I was preparing to come here, I get to church on Sunday, it goes a bit wrong, and I'm grumpy with the kids. I'm grumpy with drivers that are in my way. And it just applies exactly what I was hoping to say. That Jesus says, here's my teaching. Here's how I want you to live. And then you need to live it. Because that's the thing, isn't it? You need to live it. All right, knowing the thing in your head, you've got to apply it, put it into practice. And Jesus says, I want you to live this way, trusting me. And when I had the chance today, I blew it. I blew it. Because I didn't keep close to Jesus. And Jesus would say to me on that occasion, why were you so afraid? Where's your faith? Where are you trusting in me? I want you to trust me in the nitty-gritty, simple, day-to-day things of life, so that you don't have to pray about, shall I put the kettle on? Put the kettle on. But what am I going to say? How will I address this? How will I handle this situation? What will I say to people when I speak to them? Use your brains, because he's already told us to do that. Think about things, but then put it into practice. So take God's word, soak yourself in it, and apply it to your day-to-day situation. Different types of soil. Which one are you? Different types of seed. But the seed will grow. It will become a big plant. We as a church will survive because Jesus is behind us. Jesus is behind us. He will do what he promises to do. But in the meantime, when the storm comes that wants to upset the apple cart, remember to put into practice all the things that you've heard, that you've been taught, that you're thinking about, so that you can live the way that Jesus would have you do, so that you can actually trust Jesus to say, he promises to be with me. He will be with me. He promises to help me if I ask him. I need to ask him for help. I need to ask him for his strength, for his wisdom. Whatever we need to ask Jesus for to help us in each day-to-day situation so that we can do the things that he asks us to do. the soil, the seed, and the sea. I'm going to stop there, because that's me done.